Welcome to Mangastorian's Complete Story Series. My name is Benny, and today we'll be covering Berserk, Volume 6. All alterations to the panels, text, and images are to prevent copyright problems, and all art is owned by its respective companies. Now, at the end of our last chapter, Guts and Griffith fought against the demon known as Zod. During the fight, Griffith was knocked down, and the demon told Guts that one day that he would have to face his own death at the hands of Griffith's dreams. While Guts and Griffith talk out in the courtyard, Griffith hears a voice call out to him asking if he's okay from their last battle, and as the two of them look up, they see the King of Midland. Griffith quickly bows, and after being yelled at by the king's brother Julius, Guts does the same. The king praises Griffith for his support in the previous battle, and as the king goes on, Griffith notices a young girl standing behind him and his guards. Griffith asks who the girl is, and she shies away behind the pillar, and the king tells her to come on out. The young girl is his daughter, Charlotte, and as she walks out, she trips over a stone and begins to fall. Griffith quickly catches her, asking if she's alright, and Julius runs over, slapping him, telling him that commoners are not allowed to touch the princess. Guts steps forward, ready to hit him, but Griffith stops him and smiles, stating, "I'm terribly sorry, General Julius." A short while later, after the king and Julius leave, Julius stands in the halls as Minister Foss walks by. He tells Julius that he looks rather unhappy, but Julius tells him it's nothing. Foss then asks if he's heard about this year's fall hunt, led by the king and his relatives. And Julius asks what about it. His guard, the White Dragon Knights, have been honor guard every year for that event. And Foss says that according to the Majesty, this year the Band of Hawks will have the honor of watching over them during that event. Julius is shocked. What did you say? The fall hunt is when the Majesty and other nobility socialize. Only the army of the White Dragon should have that honor. It is my job! Foss goes on stating, this won't do. Even with Griffith being a commoner, he may rise to the ranks of general like you. But during the hunt, it would be a shame if someone were to be struck by a stray arrow dipped in poison. Julius stops and says, "You don't mean." And Foss says, "Surely by accident." And then Julius begins to think, telling himself that would be excellent. As the fall hunt arrives, Griffith and his hawks watch over the nobles as they proceed hunting in the forest. Though Guts expresses how pointless this is, Corcus tells him how important it is for them. But while the two of them bicker about this, Griffith notices Charlotte as she turns away as the nobleman shoot at a fox, and he asks if she dislikes hunting. She tells him that it's cruel, just like war. I don't understand why men have to fight. And without saying anything, Griffith reaches to a branch, pulling off a leaf, and he begins to use it as a whistle. Charlotte does the same, but she doesn't really make a whistle, and the two of them smile at each other. And then suddenly a boar runs past them, scaring Charlotte's horse. The horse begins to buck and run off, so Griffith follows, chasing them down to the nearby creek. But as Griffith gets on top to stop the horse, in the brush nearby, a man with a crossbow positions himself. Charlotte says that it was her first time riding a horse. She was so scared! And Griffith then asks if she's no longer scared. She begins to blush, and suddenly a bolt flies through the air, piercing Griffith's armor right in his chest. The rest of the hawks begin to show up, and Guts calls out to Griffith as he falls back into the creek. Guts then begins to ask Charlotte what happened, and as Casca asks how did this happen, Griffith tells him that they're being so loud, and everyone stops to see Griffith not dead. They begin to ask how he survived, and then he pulls out a necklace that he had, showing that that was what took the hit. The egg of the Emperor saved him again. Charlotte gets off her horse, stating that she's so sorry. If she hadn't lost control of her horse, that would have never happened. And Griffith tells her that there is no need to apologize. The guards begin to ask who was it that attempted to kill their leader, and Guts says that he will take his men and search the area. As everyone heads off, Griffith sees Julius in the distance, and as he looks, he sees Julius turn away and leave. Then Griffith looks back at the poisoned arrow and he smiles. Later that night, Griffith calls Guts up to his study, and as Guts walks in, he asks if he's even read all of these books, and Griffith tells him, pretty much. But some of them are rather interesting. Look at this one with the naked women in it. Guts sits down with the book, flipping through it, asking this isn't the reason that I'm here, right? And Griffith tells him no, he called him here because he wants him to kill a certain person. Guts asks, kill? And Griffith tells him yes. The poison on that arrow that was fired was a super expensive kind, one a commoner can't afford. And after some digging, there is only one shop that sells it. The purchase was made by a sharpshooter in the White Dragon army. So Griffith bribed a servant girl to keep an eye on him, and she found him secretly going in and out of Duke Julius's room. She couldn't hear much, but she could hear them talking about an assassination. So he's asking Guts to assassinate Julius. Griffith asks him if he'll help him, and Guts tells him, don't make this complicated. If you want it done, just order me like you normally do. So later that night, Guts travels to the rooftops of Julius's manor, and he watches him and his son spar. But after the boy is knocked down, it reminded him of how Gambino trained with him. But then he realized, why would he remember that at a time like this? As Julius sits in his chambers, he wonders what he should do next, and then he notices the draft and he looks up to see a hooded Guts standing before him. He tries to reach for his sword, but as he goes, Guts swings his sword, cutting down Julius. As he falls to the ground, he falls forward, telling Guts that he knows. He works. Griffith but then slowly he lets go as he dies. Guts hears the door open and the figure sees Julius on the ground and shouts that there's an intruder! Guts rushes at the figure, thrusting his sword out, stabbing into the figure, and then as the light shines, we see that it was Julius's son, Adonis. Adonis's body slides down the wall, leaving a bloody trail, and he begins to try and talk. Guts grabs onto the boy's hand, but he starts to cry, and soon falls lifeless, and then he dies. The guards begin to appear and ask what's going on, and Guts rushes through them, slashing at all of them, killing them, making his escape. Julius's servant Hudson looks at the bodies and tells the guards to find out who did this. But outside, Guts is already slicing and killing the guards in his path. He manages to run to the outer wall, and then he jumps over and hides in the sewers. But as he falls in, he begins to have a vision. It was him and Gambino training when he was younger, and then Zod appeared swinging his sword. The swing took off Gambino's head, and then Guts charged in, and Zod stabbed him and tossed his body to the side. But as Zod's face came into the light, it wasn't Zod, it was Guts. As Guts begins to wake back up, he notices all of the cuts and wounds that he suffered from the escape, and he picks himself back up to head back home. A little while later, he walks into their barracks and everyone looks at him, and Casca asks what happened. And he just responds with, "Where's Griffith?" And Casca says that he's at a party for the princess. Guts turns and walks back out, and Casca tries to stop him, but he doesn't respond and leaves. He then heads over to the castle and he heads up the walkway, but then he sees Griffith standing with Charlotte. After watching them for a bit, Guts starts to walk up the stairs, and then he's stopped as Casca grabs him, asking if he's gonna go looking like that. He's going to embarrass Griffith. She then takes out a knife and cuts off a piece of her sleeve, tending to the arrow wound in his arm, but Guts stands and listens. As Griffith and Charlotte sit and talk, Charlotte asks why men can't just stop having wars, and Griffith says true men have their barbaric side, but it's the only way to acquire and defend important things. But there's also something else that you fight for. That's a dream. That's something that you do for yourself and not for others. Those who just seek life just to live another day, that's unacceptable. Guts is stopped by those words, and Charlotte says, "That sounds amazing. Your friends must follow you because of your charm." Griffith tells her, "They do serve me well, but to me, they are not friends. A friend would not just follow another's dreams. A friend would find his own reason to live. A friend, in my mind, is someone that is my equal." Guts stops and he thinks, is that what he's been doing? Following Griffith and he's not been seen as a friend? As Griffith and Charlotte continue their talk, words begin to spread of the death of Julius and Adonis, as a noblewoman runs in shouting into the heavens. Griffith stands there and he smiles. Casca listens to them silently, and then she looks back at Guts as he walks away, and she wonders. Soon the day comes for the next battle, and the Hawks are stationed in the front lines due to the death of Julius. On his way out, Minister Foss stops Griffith, telling him that he wishes him luck, but also about that assassination, they still haven't found the killer. Foss goes on stating that it must have been the work of a demon, but Griffith stops him, telling him, no, not a demon, a human did it. Foss stays silent for a moment, and then he says that he heard that the arrow that shot him wasn't intended for the princess. It was in fact intended for him. Griffith laughs, stating, "Me? I'm just a division leader." But Foss tells him, "Don't be so modest. The rumor also says that you weren't from the warring Judah, but rather from within the palace." But as Griffith walks off, he says, "That's an amusing theory, but I must go now," and prepare to leave. Foss watches and he begins to think how even after mentioning Julius's death, Griffith remained calm. Maybe he doesn't suspect them, or maybe he's just being a bit paranoid. There's no way that they could trace it back to him, Foss, is there? However, after still watching, Foss looks down at the hall back at Griffith and he sees him staring right back at him, and then he leaves. Before leaving, Princess Charlotte stops Griffith to give him something. A lodestone pendant of a knight. It's a magnet, and while he's out, the female would try and pull him back to safety. He says that he can't keep something so important to her, so when he comes back, he'll give it back to her. But as he walks off, Charlotte notices Casca standing close by and tells her, "Please protect Griffith." And then she tells her, with her very life. As they leave, the queen appears before Charlotte, asking what does she think she's doing? Why did she give away something so important? As a matter of fact, she shouldn't even be talking to Griffith. Charlotte tries to say that she can do whatever she wants, but then she hangs her head in silence. The Hawks all begin to move out, but while leaving, Guts can only think about what Griffith said. A friend in his mind is someone that is his equal. As the Hawks leave, Casca begins to feel pain in her stomach, asking why today of all days. A little while later, as the group moves in, Griffith calls out the order to attack as the two armies meet, and soon the bloodshed begins. Through the fighting, Casca starts to become overpowered as the other army's general looms over her. He tells her that she's the only female officer in the Hawks. She makes him sick trying to be a knight. But if she's just here to please the other soldiers, he supposes that that's okay. In a fit of rage, Casca charges at the man, but he easily knocks her off her horse and stabs a trident down between her legs. He continues trying to stab her, and Casca fights off the attacks, but slowly she is losing more and more of her strength. General Adon starts to back her closer and closer to the edge of a cliff, telling her that she's quite pretty. So I'll let you live if you'll become my whore. She tells him to shut his filthy mouth, and then he raises the trident to strike down, but as he does, there's a loud clank. Casca opens up her eyes to see Guts blocking the strike with his sword, telling her, "This is so unlike you." After pushing the trident away, Guts swings back, knocking Adon off balance, telling him, "Come on, I'm beginning to enjoy swinging this." Adon begins twirling his trident, asking if he can block this attack, the fighting stance of the Bokovich, which has been passed down for more than 140 years. Guts swings downward on Adon, breaking through the trident, lodging the sword into Adon's helmet, but not killing him. And as he falls, Guts swings a second time, slicing through the side of his face. Adon is flung back, and as he gets back up, he says, "Damn you, Guts." But Guts walks over to Casca, asking, "What's wrong? You're not your usual self today." And she looks at him without saying anything, and then begins to faint. Guts reaches out to catch her from falling, but behind him, Adon gets back up, firing a crossbow towards Guts. The bolt hits the side of him as he grabs Casca, but the shot causes Guts to lose his balance and fall off his horse. The two begin to fall down the cliff into the river below as the war continues on without them. Rain begins to fall, and then from the river, Guts pulls himself up, and he pulls Casca to the shore with him, and that's when he notices that she isn't breathing. He tries his best to resuscitate her, and that's when she begins to breathe again. But that's when he begins to feel the pain from the bolt that was fired into him. He pulls it out, tossing it into the river, and then he notices a cave where the two of them can take shelter, and he carries her into it. While inside, Guts tries to tend to some of his wounds, but without anything to wear, he knows that they're going to get cold. So he tells himself he has no choice, right? This is the only thing that he can do, and he begins to remove Casca's wet clothing. After removing her shirt, he removes her pants, and he notices blood. But where was she injured? Wait. Being a woman is pretty tough. So Guts holds Casca close to keep her warm as the rain continues to fall. After some time has passed, Casca slowly begins to wake back up and ask Guts what he's doing. He says that they were lucky to fall right into the river, but she doesn't remember anything. She tries to pick herself up, and then she notices that she's naked and punches Guts. She begins throwing pieces of armor at him and even a knife, and he shouts, telling her, "Stop this, I saved you! I'm not looking for a reward, but it would be nice instead of throwing a knife at me." Guts leans back, stating, "I know why women aren't suitable for war." But Casca begins to cry, stating she didn't want to be born a woman. As she cries, Guts tries to tell her that he's sorry, and Casca starts swinging at Guts. After finally restraining her, he hands over her shirt, telling her to put this on. But the only thing that she can do is cry, stating that she didn't want him to help her. Guts thinks maybe she just hates him, and he asks her what made her join the Hawks. It's kinda tough being a woman and going to war. At first she remains silent, and then she tells him it's because of Griffith. When she was younger, she lived in a small, poor farming village, and even though it was hard to grow anything there, they were all taxed the same. When they couldn't pay, the government set fire to their homes. So they got used to being stepped on. Then one day while she was working in the fields, there was a noble that passed by, and later found out that her parents gave her away to that noble. However, on their way back to the castle, he began to force himself on her, and just before he could have his way, a light shined, and the noble's ear flew off. Sitting on his horse stood Griffith, and then he threw his sword down towards her. He told her that if she wants to protect herself, pick up that sword, and in a moment of hesitation, the noble jumped towards the sword. Casca managed to grab the sword and hold it up, but before she knew it, the sword had pierced the man's chest and he fell dead. Back then, the Hawks were just a bunch of thieves, but Casca asked them if she could go with them. Griffith looks down, stating whether she followed them or not is her choice, and Casca smiled and joined the group. And that explains where Casca came from, and we're getting a little bit closer to getting to things past the anime. I hope you guys are enjoying the Berserk storyline, and very soon we're going to be moving towards doing this weekly because Attack on Titan is about to run out. So don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying only the Berserk videos, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Mangastorian, where you'll find out when all of the new videos come out.